The key part of constructivism is the decentering of instruction away from the teacher and the recentering it on the learner. And a lot of this is that the emphasis now is creating an environment, whether this comes from the social cultural environment from the influence of multiculturalism, or let's say the social environment, meaning interaction with one's peers, or let's say the overall environment, interaction with technology, or interaction with, let's say, involvement in the community. A key part of this is that we learn better when we're actively involved than, let's say, when we are just passively involved in our education. So, for example, passive tasks such as reading and hearing, we remember a smaller percentage of the total information communicated. But when we're actively involved, such as in simulations, games, or actually direct applications of our knowledge, we'll remember a much greater percentage. And so there's this passive versus active, let's say, dimension as well. So that's kind of constructive in a nutshell. However, there's been a lot of criticism of constructivism, much of which I agree. And I think what happens is many parents have been critical of the education philosophy, whether because they see it as biased toward politically in one direction or another, or because some of these ideas lead to the lack of development in basic skills. And I think what sometimes is going on is just a redescription of people's values rather than parading sometimes as a scientific approach to education. And I think this cartoon captures that sentiment well. Another aspect, particularly in areas such as math, where there's more abstract reasoning going on, we find often, let's say, inquiry learning is not taken as well, where we find basic, let's say, procedures not being taught, and a lot of this has to do with, for example, dislike of regimentation, dislike of memorization, and of rote practices. And with the idea that this is a more holistic and a better way to learning, even though, let's say, the research is very ambivalent at best about this. But let's take a look at, let's say, some of these learning-centered principles that form the heart of constructivism. These are presented by Dr. Patricia Alexander in the video, but we can look at them in the 6 large categories. The first one is knowledge matters, and it's key to understand how a learning-centered person means this compared to, say, a teacher-centered perspective. For a teacher-centered perspective, knowledge matters means mastery of content knowledge, that you want the teacher is somehow a walking, living expert, and they're able to share that expertise with their students. However, knowledge matters from a student-centered perspective is more about prior knowledge. We know we learn when there's a change in our knowledge, and therefore we need to know what was our knowledge before the instruction occurred, and also the change that occurred afterward. And so a lot of this is knowing the student, knowing what the student knows, and also assessing their progress as their knowledge grows. A second area is basically metacognition, and this means 2 different things. The first one is thinking about thinking, or learning how to learn, this kind of idea of self-regulation and being actively aware of what we're doing in the learning process, but it also means the student is taking the initiative. They develop strategies, they decide what they want to know, and they also decide how they want to go about learning it. A third area focuses on the importance of emotions in learning, that if people are involved in positive, safe learning environments, they're going to learn better than if they're subjected to stress or negativity or things of that sort. So a lot of it, once again, the teacher is creating the positive, safe learning environment. Another part to this is that you appeal to the learner through intrinsic motivations, learning for learning's sake, learning because it's fun and engaging, rather than extrinsic motivations such as grades, carrots and sticks and things of that sort. And particularly for a higher level academic task, we might focus on autonomy, mastery, and purpose, shortened as AMP, that autonomy, we want to learn at our own pace, that we want to get better at something and master it, and we also want a clearly defined reason why we're learning this. A fourth area is about the differences between students, and this can be developmental differences a la Piaget, where different students are at different levels along the same pathway, but also that students learn differently and might have different strengths and weaknesses, such as learning styles. They might have different intelligences in one area or another, but the basic emphasis here is that students are unique and instruction has to appreciate that basic fact. The fifth area is situation and context. For example, that students are taking leadership. They are, let's say, defining what their assessment should be and participating in it. They're working in peer-to-peer learning networks where they're going horizontally as well as vertically with a teacher and not simply a simple binary relationship. And finally, assessment, that we're taking track of what is being done in education.